Today's the first of our online webinars for our Employment Academy. So we're doing this over the next couple of months with lots of different subjects. So thank you for coming today. Just on today's session, so selling on neurodiversity online is a different way. It's a different way of communicating. Also being on camera, letting people into your bedrooms, into your houses, is a new thing that everyone's having to deal with. So Nat's going to give us a few tips today on that. Nat, do you want to take it away? We're going to be sharing slides.
Yeah.
So if you want to share your screen, and then we can...
All right, let me just get my screen up. To give you guys a bit of background, I'm Nat, and I have dyslexia, dyspraxia, and also mild autism. I do a lot of presenting, but there's something about being on, I think, webcam that I find, I don't know, very stressful. Like even doing this now, it still doesn't feel very natural. So, but been doing it for a number of years now, I think I've learned a few tips and tricks on one, how to get over the anxieties, but more importantly, how to go the next step and actually find a way of communicating with your teams during interviews or anything that might work in your advantage. So today I'm going to be talking about neurodiversity as a whole, but with a focus on dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, and ADHD. And I see quite a few familiar faces today, but for those of you who do not know, let's see, exceptional individuals, we help companies with some diverse recruiting, so getting some talent like people in this group. We do free support, so if any of you are looking for a job, you can just come and see us and we can help you with CVs, interview prep, or anything related to neurodiversity, as well as a few other things. Now, it looks to me that you all did pretty good on getting onto Zoom, which is great. Honestly, there's so many different platforms. I don't know, if you're anything like me, you've had to download so many different apps on your computer now. My computer is struggling. But the main ones available, we've got Google Hangouts, Zoom, we've got WebEx, Skype, Microsoft Teams, and you know what, if you're with your friends, you can use House Party, which is good fun. But most of the things I mentioned today will work on all of these, but I am going to be focusing on Zoom just because it seems to be the most popular at the moment. But hopefully they're quite transferable. Now, I want you guys to interact as much as possible. So what I want you to do, using the chat function, which is like this button here, if you could just write one sentence about something you find challenging about presenting yourself on video, and I'll try my best to answer as many as possible.
So now we've got reading reactions from everyone in the room to know your message is landing. I find it difficult to deal with the lapse in times. I don't like to interrupt the other person. Some people with technical difficulties as well, like cameras not working, looking engaged online, people with Tourette's, so turning their sound off, how to come across as more confident as well, and also people with dyslexia needing to organize themselves and their time, eye contact, minor distractions. So yeah, I think we're going to cover a lot of these.
Well, good to know that I am covering the vast majority of what all of you are looking for. But the general themes I'm seeing is about communicating and how you come across on camera. I know as someone who is like neurodivergent, particularly my like autistic characteristics, sometimes people will not kind of read the right body language off of me. And that is when they're like in the 3D space, when they can see my emotions clearly, they can see how I'm standing, they can hear the different variations of my voice. But on video, it kind of limits it a bit more. But where it does limit it in some areas, it does also open up more possibilities in other areas. So that's kind of what we're going to be exploring. Now, why neurodiversity? Why are we working on that? This workshop, by any means, could be beneficial to any demographic that has to present themselves on video. But with neurodiversity, we have like amazing strengths. So for instance, we might be really good at being mathematical, but we might struggle in creativity, or it might be the complete opposite way round. But we tend to have amazing strengths and weaknesses, which, you know, we really struggle with. Now, this also translates to presenting on video. where a neurotypical person might be, you know, they might not enjoy it, but they might be okay. Someone with, say, dyslexia might find it even more of a struggle to communicate effectively. And also, we are going to mention, because I know some of you said, oh, I don't have my webcam, I don't like appearing on it. What do you do if you really don't want to show your face? Now, the first thing I'm going to let you know is to avoid the old double chin. People are always concerned about not looking that flattering on webcam. And the one on the right is a perfect demonstration. He represents my mum every time I have a video call with her. She's like, oh, you know, can you see me? And it's the first sign you don't have a clue what you're doing. And with the guy on the left, he is looking directly eye level, and it shows he's engaged, he seems more professional, and it's just a slight little thing which can make you feel a little bit more confident. But the general rule of thumb here is that treat it like it's a real meeting, because it absolutely is. I think a lot of the time, now we've been working at home, you know, we've been all in our, like, you know, dressing gowns. I've been watching Netflix in the background. I've been letting all the cats in the neighborhood just roam around my house. I've been loving it, but you've also got to remember that these are real meetings that we're having. So what would you do to prepare in a normal circumstance? Well, you'd have your kind of like pen and paper available. You'd research everyone who's attending beforehand. If you're aware of who's attending, you'd have objectives, you'd have follow-ups. And from my experience, most people have been lacking them. I'm sure some of you would have already experienced this. People having like Skype calls or web calls just for the sake of it these days. And it's great, you know, it's nice to check in, but it's still good to have like a firm outcome. But it is the world we're kind of living in these days. Boris Johnson, I don't know if you've seen, like, the whole of the cabinet have been delivering their own webinars at the moment. And he's a classic example of like the double chin and not doing the great angle. He doesn't come across overly flattering. And when you ask people, why do they feel kind of that anxious while being on camera? It's normally that they just do not like seeing their face all the time. And can you really blame them? It's not a natural thing. On a day-to-day basis, when are we ever looking at our faces all the time? So a good way of getting around this, and I want you all to try this in a second, is you're still showing your face. So the webcam is still working, but you're hiding it from your own view. So if you go over your little face, you should be able to see 3 little dots. And if you click those 3 little dots, there'll be one that says hide self view. And by clicking on that, it will still be recording. So the rest of the team will be able to see you, but you will not be able to see yourself. Now, this may not work for everyone. Me personally, I like to be reminded that I'm on camera because, you know, within a few seconds, I'll be like, and it's not as engaging. But for other people, it helps them kind of relax. Does this work on Hangouts too? You can hide your view, I believe, on Hangouts, yeah. But if you're in a service which doesn't have that feature, a good way of getting around it is, say if you have like a little post-it note, you can kind of just stick it over the bit of your screen that has your face on. And I do that sometimes rather than faffing about with all the settings, because I think we all like to think we're quite tech savvy, but when it comes to it, webcam sessions can be quite stressful because, I don't know, it just feels like the stakes are a bit higher. And as someone who has like anxiety, I want to limit this as much as possible. Oh, okay. And
Nat, just one more question there.
yeah.
We've got, how do people get their faces back?
Okay, so to get your face back, easy enough. You go over any of our faces, and again, you click on the 3 little dots. So, for instance, and then it will say like show your face again. And hopefully that's worked for you guys, because it's all well and good getting rid of your face, but you might want to check it out again. Now, this is something that I found, just a little tip, because again, a lot of the things I'm going to mention, I'm focusing on neurodiversity, but it kind of does affect the entire population. We're quite vain. So we are always worried about maybe have some spots on our face, you know, it's not been a good day. On Zoom, you can actually add like a touch-up feature. So if you see on this picture, you have this girl and she's on the other side, it's more kind of softer and a bit more blurry. And that's something that she just finds more useful. Really useful. Now, to do this is relatively simple. All you need to do is go to the settings, the video tab, and touch at my appearance. I will give you guys a live demonstration in a moment once I've shown you the next section, but it's just a good thing to know. There's also a really useful feature on Skype, which allows you to blur your background, which can make you feel a bit more comforting. You'll see that I've got this lovely blue background at the moment, just because I didn't really want you guys seeing how messy my house was. So I'll tell you how you can do that in a moment. Okay. Whoop. Oh. All right, now, creating a video calling room. It can be so tempting just to do your video anywhere. Oh, I'm in bed, why not? But again, it makes you look less professional, and also I think it doesn't help you mentally prepare. It's like, normally, I'm not today, I would wear a shirt when I'm having my Skype calls, just because it makes me feel like, I don't know, I've got the same mentality as I would going into like any normal meetings. The reason why I'm not wearing one today though, is mine disappears with my kind of effect. So I would have looked like a ghost. Always worth to check out those things. Have any of you guys ever, I'm sure you all have, but this video on the side of this TV presenter, he's just having a professional meeting, I think it was on the BBC, and his little child kind of walked in, and then his wife came and quickly scooped her out. These things can be incredibly, they're funny, but they can be incredibly distracting. And with people with neurodivergence, particularly like if you've got ADHD, Tourette's, once your mind gets distracted, it can be incredibly difficult to like draw it back in and get back on the track again. So I always think, what can possibly go wrong? Okay, so I've told my housemates I'm having a call, maybe they can stay away. I've locked my conservatory so those crazy cats can't get in. My kind of like any fans I've turned off. Anything that could possibly go wrong, I try my best to mitigate, because it kind of will do. Next, now we're onto the virtual background. This essentially turns your background into anything you want it to. There's pros and cons. So if you've got quite a plain background, so I see like Charlotte, your background is quite like white, it might work quite well. But Macy, as your background has more like features, it might struggle with. If you guys see, my teeth are actually see-through now. So you kind of got to see where it works and where it doesn't. But the reason why I like having a different background is, again, it makes me feel more comfortable that my living room, my bedroom still feels mine, and I'm not sharing it with the rest of the world. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. And let me get my screen open. And okay, so I want you all to give this a go. It may not work for all of you, but it's worth giving it a go anyway. So if you guys can see, you go to Zoom and you can go to Preferences. Can you all see this okay? Yep, okay, brilliant. And then you have these features. So the one I mentioned about the beauty touch-up, on the video one, you have, let me move that quickly, you have touch up my appearance. And again, all that does is make you a slight bit softer. But for virtual backgrounds, you click on this one and you'll see I have all these different options. So I can be in San Francisco, or I can, be in A Bug's Life. I could go to the moon, be on brand. You can have all sorts of different backgrounds. Again, it shows a bit of personality and character, but the pros and cons, it can also be a little bit distracting. So this is why I try to go for quite a neutral one that isn't too overpowering. How I did this in my room, you'll see, like, this is like a projector that I've got, but you can essentially use a bed sheet, or you can kind of use anything which is quite matte and a plain color. So Matt's done his now. If he's kind of turned into a little bit of a ghost, because his background has too many colors and it gets a little bit confused. So as with all things, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Neurodiversity, I always find, for overcoming the challenges is like a cocktail. You know, it's about experimenting until you find what assistive technology works and which ones are just useless. For me, this works. For you guys, it may not. You do have to have quite even lighting on the whole. All right, let's me get back to Zoom.
Tony, you in space? Where are you right now?
I think it's the Northern Lights at the back. I think that's...
Nice.
I think I want to go on holiday though. I think I want to go to the Bahamas, so I'm gonna change it.
I mean, I think we all want to just get out of the house at the very least. Yeah. But
there you go.
So yeah, well done. All right, and we're doing good. Now we've done the virtual backgrounds. Again, it's a suggestion, not like that. Yeah. I have been working outside the last couple of days, but today is not the day for it. All right, so we're going got strong, guys. Quite a lot of information to take in, but at very least, it's good to have a bit of a break in the day. So lights, camera, action, and mute. Now, for this session, Matt made sure that all of you were mute to begin with, but quite a lot of sessions, they don't have that feature enabled. And it can be really annoying when you have that like echo or dogs barking or babies screaming, or even like a slight little hum. And it could be enough to distract someone who is neurodivergent, if you aren't, to the point where they find it difficult to concentrate. Or say if you do have like Tourette's or a stammer, or like you kind of make like movements that maybe relate to autism or something else altogether, you don't want to kind of like keep bringing it up. So where this could be a strength is just by clicking the mute, it allows you to do your thing. A little tip is, if you guys push your space bar, it should unmute it while you're holding the space bar. So if you guys could all like just say like hello or something.
No.
Hello.
Nice. All right, that worked. And what I like about using the space bar is that normally you kind of forget to do it. Like either you're talking and there's no sound. See there, I was playing. But that can be really frustrating because then everyone in the team's like, you're on mute. But using the space bar is a good way to safeguard it. And it makes me feel more comfortable because I'm very aware that people are watching me and listening to me. So if I do have to show my face, which is, to be honest, it is polite, even if we don't like it, at least I can have the comfort of being able to sometimes play music in the background, which can kind of make me feel more relaxed, and it also doesn't annoy other people. But to do that, very simple. It's just on the little bar here, it's this one. So mute and unmute. Now, if you see this image, this is just another tip on how you can kind of stay less distracted, but also give a better view to other attendees. Can anyone say in the messages kind of why this image isn't great? Like, he's a bit silhouetted. Does anyone know why it didn't turn out great? Yeah, Lauren, like the honey, yeah, makes it totally right. It's because the light is behind him. And this might get in a little bit more technical, but the way cameras work is you have the lens and the light goes into it, and then it's able to like determine the image. But a lot of people just set up their webcams, their video messages, wherever they kind of can find a comfy seat. But if this light is shining into the webcam, it will make you kind of all like fainted. And in many ways, it can draw more attention to you. So I try to minimize that. The good way I remember is always sit towards a light source. So right now, I'm sitting towards my window, so the light is hitting my face, and it's making me look hopefully less tired than I actually am. So really simple thing, but sit towards the light and have the camera facing away from the light, and you're always going to get a better image. Next one is screen share. And the reason why this relates to people who are neurodivergent is, though I can advocate all day long that you should show your face, go on webcam, it shows you're engaged, it shows you're listening, some people just hate being on webcam. One, they might not have a camera that works, but two, it just might not be for them. And the anxiety it causes them going on camera just isn't worth the stress involved or the benefits. But with that in mind, you still have to show you're engaged somehow, because otherwise people just assume like you could be doing anything. Like right now, Lauren, I don't know what you're doing. You could be playing video games for all I know. And even though I guarantee you're not, as a presenter, I'm not aware of that engagement. So what you can do is, if they allow it, you can share your screen, and say if you're looking at a document, you're talking over a presentation, you can share your screen, and it will show the viewer that you guys are, you're Snapchatting. It could show you that the person's engaged. So I just want you guys to give it a quick try now. I don't know if does the setting work? Matt, is that on at the moment?
That won't work at the moment, Nat, because it's just you presenting.
Okay, cool. Well, depending on the settings, you can all like do that. But for instance, I could turn my video off and you could still see me sharing the screen. And you can actively see I'm participating in the discussion, even though I'm not showing my face. So that's a good little workaround. Though there are other ways of showing that you're engaged. A few other ways I'll quickly show you guys is, one, the chat feature. So you've been using it already now, and if you do not have your video enabled, by engaging, Joe's engaged, by talking to people, it shows that you are actually present and you just haven't kind of like nipped to get like a cup of tea or something. So I always find that really reassuring. You do screen share, as I mentioned, but one that I particularly like is, if you see this kind of button here, the reactions one, it sends up like a little emoji on your screen. So say like, guys, are you having a good time today? If you click it, yes, and that's a little thumbs up. You can also do like little clapping hands. All right, let's see if we can get one from all of you guys. Yeah, got a few claps. Yeah, thumbs up, nice. And why this is really great is, even if you're showing your face, some people hate the sound of their voice. I don't know why. When I'm like listening to myself, I'm like, hey, I'm Nat. But when I listen back to myself, it's like, hello. No one likes the sound of their voice, particularly so much that it can make me more self-conscious in a way that I wouldn't want to talk. But by using these little emojis, it shows that to the host that you're listening, you're paying attention, and you appreciate what they're saying. Now, with Zoom, it does only have thumbs up and clapping, so you can't say you don't like today, you can only say you like it, which works for me. You can also present, nice. Tony, what do you mean by that? Tony said you can also tick bits of the presentation. Oh, okay, let's unmute Tony.
Yeah. So can you hear me now? Yeah. So if you go into annotations, you can actually, if on the top with the green bar, it says you're viewing that whole screen. There's a view options bit. And if you hit annotate, you can like stamp things with like either a heart or a star or a cross.
That's really good, Tony.
So yeah,
Oh,
I learned that today.
My presentation. Guys, you're destroying it.
You can also draw like silly things and like. Yeah.
Okay. Well, how do I stop you from destroying it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't worked that bit out.
All right, nice. Well, I've cleared it now.
Yeah.
So obviously that's a good way to have group facilitation, as long as the host knows you're doing it. Otherwise, it'll just think like graffiti artist. Okay. All right, well, I had a good question here from Elliot, and he said, emojis are a good idea. However, people that aren't so aware of neurodiversity might see it as a lazy / minimal effort approach. How would you combat that through any potential situations? That is a really good question. I think a lot of the time it's about establishing ground rules beforehand. Like if I have a communication difficulty, or I am far more efficient at selling myself through another method, I would normally email the host beforehand and let them know, because at least that way everyone's on the same page and there can't be any misunderstandings. But I think it's definitely something to worth note about. It's like,
sorry, Nat. I was going to say,
on.
afterwards we share some email templates with all of you that you can use to email people before the presentations. So things like that, Elliot, we can definitely help with the actual wording of how we would approach it, and then you can make edits to it however you would. But there's definitely just the awareness before helps.
Yeah, awareness is definitely the key. It's like, as a team, we use Skype quite a lot. And if someone does a message, just like on Facebook, you can do a reaction. So you can be like, thumbs up. Sometimes I find the thumbs up a little bit sarcastic. Like, what are you saying? But that's my interpretation of the message, and that might not be the intention of the other person. So by saying, well, when I do a thumbs up, it just means that I've acknowledged it, I read it, and I've understood. Oh no, now I'm graffitiing on it. Woo! Okay. Annotations, let's clear. And we're getting off of that. Okay. And those are some of the main ways that I find it's easy to kind of overcome these difficulties. Now, the thing is, I don't know if you guys will agree or if you have your own experiences, but a lot of the people we work with neurodivergency can struggle with some of the like technical elements of these new softwares, and also like retaining. So I can teach you all today, but let's face it, you might forget later on, and that's completely okay. I forget all the time as well, but it's being able to get that information to really stick in the brain. So we do have workplace needs assessments, which is, if any of you currently are in work, we can get a grant for you. And with that grant, we can get technology and training, so you can have like a more one-to-one support. So if that applies to you, that any of you are in work right now, and I believe this even counts people on furlough, feel free to get in touch and we can see about getting you more in-depth one-to-one training, because it's perfectly normal for this not to sink in the first time around. But as mentioned, I will send you the notes.
Nat, can we go through the questions that people at the start sent, just to check we've answered them, and any ones that we haven't answered we can do now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's look at the questions.
I'll read them out to you. So we got one from Lauren, who said that she's going to turn her sound off because of Tourette's. Have you got any advice for people that do have tics or Tourette's or any other of those neurodivergencies when they have the sound on? I know you mentioned it a bit. Would that be letting the host know before again, or what would you advise?
I think in that case, it would just be being able to always mute, and only when you want to talk, unmuting or using the space bar. Because for me, it's about minimizing the chances of distracting others, but also kind of like making you feel more self-aware and conscious about your Tourette's.
Cool. And the next one from Jessica is looking engaged. I mean, we've touched on it slightly here today, but some people find it difficult to look engaged.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're all aware of the phrase resting bitch face. And what I mean is, like, even though you're really engaged, you always look like you're annoyed. It could be the most fascinating presentation in the world, but nothing. And that's why by engaging in other areas such as the chat function or using like the little like emojis and thumbs up, it allows the people to know that even if you appear not engaged, there's other routes that have allowed you to contribute. I also find that it's okay, say if you need to like turn your webcam off for like a few seconds and like get up, shake it all about and kind of go back onto it. I do that in like real life, and I just might, if I'm having like a really long session, I'll quickly pop out, have a little run up and down, and it kind of allows me to, I don't know, kind of like recharge and become re-engaged again.
Thanks, Nat. And one from Tony here. Tony, do you want to say your one? It's around reading reactions from everyone. Do you just want to expand a bit on what you meant by that?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I had a, this is actually a pre-COVID example, and I don't know, I guess it is still relevant, but I was talking to a room full of people. I guess you wouldn't have a room full of people necessarily, but I think it's still a challenge when you just have cameras, and I found it quite challenging to know if the message I was sending was landing. I think that was more challenging in a web camera that was just sitting in a meeting room. It's probably slightly easier when everyone's got a camera, but still when you've got a large audience, it's a lot harder to gauge people's reactions via this medium than it is through other things. And I know obviously if you've got conditions like autism, that can be amplified. So I was just wondering what your tips were for sort of gauging. I guess you've covered it with some of the tools about like gauging reactions, but I don't know if you had any other thoughts on how to sort of get people, how to gauge how your message is landing, basically.
Yeah, and that is something which I think most people who are on the spectrum can really resonate with. It's like becoming engaged, letting people to like, is it making sense what you're saying? And in like the real world, you know, people, there's like all the different, you can taste, smell, hopefully not your people you're having meetings with, but you have all these other different senses. And knowing that you are more limited when delivering a webinar or like a meeting online, you've got to find other ways to add more communication. So I always say, you know, guys, is everyone understanding? Can you give me like a thumbs up if you hear me? Or if they don't, yay. Or if you don't have a thumbs up, you might use the little emojis, but allowing for some clarification. If there is any gray area, it's always important to make sure everyone's on the same page. And I think this goes back to the bit I mentioned about treating it like a real meeting. So by having objectives and also having outcomes at the end. So an email saying, okay, guys, this is what we discussed. This is what we agreed upon. And it gives a second chance for everyone to say, oh, I didn't know that's what you're on about. Or, yeah, no, I understood that. I'm glad we understand.
Thanks, Nat. And there's one more, I've got a couple more, but one from Charlotte. Charlotte, are you right asking Nat this one? If I unmute you, I can't actually see you. Let me unmute you, Charlotte. You're still muted. Any luck?
No, she's still muted.
Okay. Well, Charlotte, there we go.
No. So classic example is this delay. You ask a question and the two of you might speak at the same time if you're having an interaction one-to-one with the other person.
That is horrible, and I absolutely hate that. Because even in normal communications, you can kind of have these mix-ups where you kind of like butt heads or you talk at the same time. But it's even worse. If you ever do like a conference call when there's no video at all, even more difficult. But I do find being on videos a little bit easier. For instance, it might seem a little bit like juvenile, but just raising your hand and, you know, showing that you have something to say, or in the chat saying, guys, I'm just going to mention now. And it does, oh, nice little heart. And it does allow, I think, everyone to feel more aware. for instance, if any of you guys wave now or put your like hand up, I would know that you'd want to grab my attention. And I found that to work. And yes, it might seem a bit weird at the beginning, but when you kind of get used to that culture, it becomes like second nature and no one seems to care.
But I have a slight problem if I go off at a tangent and I have ideas, and sometimes if I don't express them immediately, I forget them. So so in life, I do butt in a bit to other people. You know, I don't mean to, and I think everyone who knows me understands that I'm kind of a little bit all over the place. But that, I think, is more exaggerated when you're having that kind of interaction, a one-to-one.
Yeah.
On screen.
It definitely seems to be one or the other. Either people go far more quiet than they would normally, or they feel they kind of like need to speak. With these things, I always have like a pen and paper around, and if an idea comes into my head, I quickly write it down. But also the fact that I am on mute allows me to just kind of like say it out loud and not to worry so much about like butting in with people. So always having the mute on, if you know that you're that sort of person, and then normally you'll have time to think, oh, it was on mute, and you've had more time to process whether it was something worth saying.
Okay.
I think that's where the chat function comes in so important as well. So we've got about 5 to 10 more minutes, guys. So a couple more questions here that we haven't covered today. Nat, there's one here from Elliot on minor distractions. So when you hear yourself on feedback and being a bit more anxious about when you stop focusing on how to communicate so if you were the presenter, so when you do have those distractions, so what are the coping mechanisms you use to deal with when you're presenting and someone externally is distracting you or something in the house is going on? Is there any top tips there?
I mean, this happens to me all the time, getting distracted. That's why I like, for instance, I tell my housemates, okay, can you give me some space for half an hour, or any pets I kind of like lock out, because it only takes for one slight little thing to grab my attention, even though I'm talking to you now. And the great thing is, because you can only see this part of me, while I'm talking to you, I don't know if you can see, but like, I always kind of like, I sit cross-legged, and in a normal kind of, my face. There we are. In a normal kind of conventional meeting, that might not be appropriate, but in this situation, I can get in a position which allows me to become more focused, or I have like something I can kind of like play with, and it just allows me to stay a little bit more hyper-focused. So it's okay to fiddle with things, have other things around. But if you can position yourself in a static background, it does help. In one way, facing a window is good because you have natural light, but in another way, you're far more likely to have, say, people outside passing along, which by very nature. So close the curtains, turn on the lights, avoid anything which may move.
Thanks, Nat. And last question here that we've had from Stephanie. I can read it out, Stephanie, or happy to, if you want to say it to Nat yourself. I can't see you. Should I read it out, Stephanie, or thumbs up? Oh yeah, you're there. Go for it.
Yay!
It's you put us on mute, and a lot of presenters do that, and then ask you to send in questions. And I get really worried about that, because I think, oh gosh, they're going to really see all my spelling mistakes, and everybody else be able to see it, and you lose a bit of professionalism, I think. So I just wondered, is there any tips on how you could, put your questions in without that worry?
That is something that I get like anxiety over all the time, because I do have spelling software, but it doesn't always work on these different platforms. Or when I, for instance, use my voice and it types out, because you're doing it in a live scenario, it might not always be appropriate. And this probably goes back to the bit where, if you kind of communicate, if you feel comfortable with the host beforehand, you can allow you to like speak rather than type. Or by typing, what I sometimes do is have pre-messages already typed out that I can copy and paste. So if I know what webinar I'm going into, I may already have had questions that I would like to ask, and I can copy and paste them. or I might just have a simple one. I have a question, can I speak it? And by using that function, I never have to worry about typos.
Cool. Thanks. That's definitely one for me. Using Skype, I've realised, because my spelling software doesn't work on Skype, I can't read my own writing afterwards sometimes. So that's one for me as well. Any other questions, guys? Put in the chat. But I think that's us coming to a conclusion now. So is there anything else you wanted to add? Or any other questions, please feel free to just unmute yourself now, because we're right at the end. So please.
Yeah, guys, we're at the end, so feel free to unmute yourself if you have anything to say. This is our first webinar of a series of webinars, so we'd love to obviously hear your feedback. And if you have any additional questions or concerns, even though we're all working at home, we're still here to help you if and where we can.